The cringe isn't about what you did. That's not actually what's happening. You already know the feeling. You're going through old photos or someone mentions something from 10 years ago and something in you contracts. Not quite embarrassment, not quite regret. Something faster than both of those. You look away from yourself. Maybe it's a photo from middle school, the one where you're wearing ski goggles as a fashion statement. Or the year you decided to be mysterious and spent every recess staring intensely out the window. And when someone finally asked what you were looking at, you said, "A bird." Not a real bird, just one in my mind. You can feel it just reading that. The full body flinch. Or it's not a photo at all, it's a memory. The live journal where every post was a song lyric, nothing else, just lyrics, broadcast into the void, aimed at one specific person who you hoped would decode them. The fire you stared into at a family party and narrated out loud? Fire, slowly burning, destroying and turning everything black. The friend who read Richard Dawkins at Taco Bell on purpose, hoping someone would start a debate. You watched him do this. You let him. These aren't tragedies. Nobody got hurt. But something about them still lands differently than ordinary memory. They don't just sit there. They arrive with a heat that ordinary embarrassment doesn't have. Something closer to exposure, like a light got turned on in a room you thought was private. And here's the thing about that room. At the time, every single one of those things made sense. The ski goggles were cool. Seth Green wore them in a movie. The window staring was mysterious. The song lyrics were poetic. The fire narration was atmospheric. From inside those moments, you weren't performing badly. You were performing exactly what you meant to perform. The version of you who did those things was not confused. They were certain. That certainty is what the cringe is actually about. Not the act, the certainty behind it. And the strange part is, the cringe gets stronger the more you cared. The moments that make you want to fold in half aren't the ones you were half-hearted about. They're the ones where you were completely, earnestly, architecturally committed to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You built something. You just didn't know what you were building. Here's where it goes somewhere else. The standard reading of cringe is, you were young, you were naive, you didn't know better, and now you do. Growth, distance, simple. But that doesn't explain why the cringe hits hardest on the things you were most intentional about. Accidents don't produce that particular heat. Naivety doesn't either. The bike that flies out from under you and sends you skidding down a driveway on your face in front of a girl. That's embarrassing, sure, but it doesn't follow you the same way. You weren't trying to be someone. You were just trying to stop. The things that follow you are the ones where you were trying. Leave the bike for a moment. There's a specific kind of photograph that people describe destroying. Not photos of bad events, photos of themselves, looking directly at the camera, performing a version of themselves they no longer recognize. The person in the photo isn't caught off guard. They composed this, they held the pose, they approved the image. And now they can't look at it. That's not embarrassment about an accident. That's something else. The thing you think is the problem, that you were trying too hard, that you cared too much, that you were performing, that's actually the evidence that something real was happening. You don't build a persona around nothing. You don't stare out windows to impress people you don't desperately want to impress. You don't broadcast coded song lyrics into the void for someone you don't actually want to reach. The performance was always downstream of something genuine. The cringe lands on the performance, but what's underneath it is real. There's a reason your body does that recoil. It's not recoiling from the person you were. It's recoiling from how visible they were, from how much they wanted, and how completely they showed it, without knowing they were showing it. The mystery kid staring at the window wasn't hiding. They were, in fact, the most exposed person in the room. They just didn't know it yet. And here is the part nobody talks about. The cringe is only possible because you can now see something you couldn't see then, which means something changed. Not just time, not just age. Something in the way you read yourself shifted, and whatever shifted, it moved fast enough that the person on the other side of it looks like a stranger. close enough to recognize, too far to claim. Go back to the window, middle school, recess. You're standing there with the intense stare, performing mystery for anyone who might be watching, and someone finally comes over and asks what you're looking at. You say, "A bird." Not a real bird, just one in my mind. Now look at what that kid was doing, not what they said, what they were doing. They wanted to be seen as someone interesting. They wanted it badly enough to construct an entire posture around it, to hold it through an entire recess, to deliver a line they'd probably rehearsed. They were not indifferent. They were the opposite of indifferent. They cared so much about being perceived a certain way that they built an architecture of behavior to produce that perception. That's not nothing. That's actually a kind of competence. Misaimed, yes. Landed badly, yes. But the underlying engine of it was real. The wanting was real. The work was real. What wasn't real was the cover story. That this was effortless, that this was just who they were, that the bird in the mind was something that just happened. The cover story is what collapsed, and this is what the cringe is actually marking. Not a failure of character. Not proof that you were broken or strange or trying too hard. The cringe is the exact moment the cover story becomes visible. When you can see from outside that what you were calling mysterious was in fact desperately legible. The costume was on. Everyone could see the seams. You were the last to know. Every version of you operated on a cover story. The cool one, the deep one, the unbothered one, the one who didn't need anything from anyone. Each one was built with genuine effort, around genuine wanting, and each one had seams. The cringe isn't grief for who you were. It's the moment the file gets declassified, and here's what stays with you. Every version of you that exists right now, the one hearing this, the one who cringes at the past, the one who has it more figured out, is also operating on a cover story. One you can't see yet. One that will become visible later. One that a future version of you will look back at and feel that same heat, that same contraction, that same impulse to look away. You don't stop performing, you just update the script, and the new script always feels like the real one until the next version of you sits down and reads the file. The question isn't whether the cover story is there. The question is, what is it covering?